I told everyone what a danger my ex was. And now suddenly, I'm the bad guy. No shelter will even take me. I've been flagged for false claims. Can you believe that? Me, Savannah, 28 years old, just trying to find a safe place. And I get treated like I'm some kind of criminal. It's absolutely insane. Honestly, I probably should have seen this coming. Not from me, obviously, but from Mark. He always had this way of making everything my fault. Like, even when he was clearly in the wrong. Suddenly, I was the one who needed to apologize. It was exhausting. And he was just so nice. Like, annoyingly nice. Like, the kind of nice guy who lets people walk all over him. And then somehow that's your problem because you're not as much of a doormat as he is. He was always trying to be the bigger person, which, between us, just made me want to scream. Like, chill? Dude, not everything needs to be a therapy session. We met at work, which, was fine. He was in accounting. I was in sales. Standard stuff. Nothing crazy. He was always offering to help me with my spreadsheets, which, I appreciate, but I don't need help. I'm good at my job. Anyway, he was always so quiet, always just nodding along, never really having an opinion. I thought it was sweet at first, like he was really listening to me. Turns out, he just didn't have anything interesting to say. Total doormat. But whatever, he was good looking enough, and he paid for stuff, so it worked. I remember this one time we were out for dinner, and I was talking about my boss, who is just, like, the absolute worst. Always breathing down my neck about numbers. Like I'm not already doing my best. And Mark, he just sits there, eating his steak, and goes, well, maybe if you tried a different approach with him. I swear, I almost choked on my water. A different approach. Like, what? Was I supposed to bake him cookies? I just stared at him. He didn't even flinch. That's Mark for you. Always trying to fix things, even when they're not broken. Or, when the only broken thing is him. Things started getting weird, though. When I mentioned maybe getting a place together, he was all for it. Naturally, he loved the idea of playing house. He's like Mr. Growth Mindset now, always talking about boundaries and self-awareness and all that garbage. But back then, he was just excited. He had a decent apartment. Nothing fancy, but enough space. I told him I'd put in some money for rent and stuff, which, yeah, I did. But I also had my own savings I wasn't touching because, you gotta be smart. You can't just go throwing all your money into a shared account. What if things go south? And they always do. The problem was, he started getting all clingy. Like, if I wanted to go out with my friends, he'd ask a million questions. Who are you going with? Where are you going? What time will you be back? It was so annoying. Like, chill. I'm not a child. I'm 28 years old. I can handle myself. But if he wanted to go do something, like play basketball with his stupid friends, suddenly I was the one being difficult if I asked where he was going. Double standards. Much. It was classic Mark. Though he wanted all the transparency from me, but then he'd get all huffy if I ever questioned him. And don't even get me started on the money. He expected me to chip in for everything, which I did, obviously, but then he'd always complain about how much he was spending. Like, hello, we're living together. Bills exist. He'd always be like, are you sure you want to order takeout again? We could cook at home. It's cheaper. And I'm like, dude, I just worked a 10-hour day. I'm tired. I don't want to cook. But he'd make it sound like I was blowing all his money or something. It was so petty. And he was always trying to get me to, budget with him. I'm like, my money is my money. Your money is also kind of my money, but not really. You get it? The arguments started small, usually about stupid things. Like, I'd leave my clothes on the floor, and he'd get all huffy about it. Or I'd forget to put the milk away, and he'd act like I'd just committed a federal crime. And then he'd get this look on his face, like he was so disappointed in me. It was so invalidating. Like, you're being dramatic. It's not that serious. But he'd make it feel like it was, and if I ever tried to explain myself, he'd just shut down. He'd just go quiet. And that was worse than him yelling, because then I didn't know what he was thinking. And it was just this suffocating silence. Total passive-aggressive garbage. I remember one time, I was trying to tell him about this really rough day I had at work, and he just kept interrupting me to talk about his own stuff. And I couldn't deal. I just started crying. And he immediately got all soft. Like, what's wrong, baby? And I just let the tears flow. Because sometimes that's all you can do, And then he felt bad. and the conversation shifted, and suddenly he was apologizing for making me upset. It worked every time. Not that I was trying to manipulate him. It just, happened. It was just easier that way. Things really went downhill when he started trying to, improve himself. He started going to therapy. And he started setting boundaries. One day he just comes home and says, "Savannah, I need to talk to you. I feel like sometimes when we argue, you don't listen to what I'm saying." And I just stared at him. What? Of course I listen. I just don't always agree. But he kept going, talking about how he needed to prioritize his own emotional well-being. It was so annoying. He was like, "Mr. Growth Mindset." All of a sudden, who even talks like that? He started getting weird about my phone, too. Not that he ever checked it, because he wouldn't dare, but he'd always. Look over my shoulder if I was texting someone. And I'd be like, What are you looking at? And he'd just shrug. Nothing. But I knew he was wondering, and meanwhile, I had full access to his, not that I ever did anything with it, but I could if I wanted to, just saying he was always guarding his privacy, but demanding to know everything about mine. It was maddening. Then he started with the social media stuff. I mean, I'm not obsessed with it or anything, but I like to post a good picture here and there. And he'd always say something like, "Are you sure you want to post that? It's a bit much." Or if I posted a picture of us, he'd be like, "That's not really how I feel right now." Hello. It's a picture. It's for show. It's not a deep, philosophical statement about the state of our relationship. But he'd make it into a big deal. And then if I didn't post enough, he'd get all weird. "Are you ashamed of me?" No, I just don't live my life through Facebook. Mark. He also had this annoying habit of comparing me to his ex-girlfriend. Not directly, but in subtle ways. He'd talk about how she used to be so good at cooking, or how she was always so organized. And I'd just bite my tongue. If she was so great, why isn't she here now? Mark? But I wouldn't say it out loud. Between us, I wanted to scream. It was like he was always trying to make me feel inadequate. The breakup, when it finally happened, was totally his fault. We had this huge fight, again, about nothing important. He was mad because I'd promised to go to his cousin's birthday party, and then I ended up going out with my friends instead. And I was like, "It's just a party. Mark, your cousin will be fine." But he got all hurt, saying I always put him last. And I'm like, "No, I just had plans. It's not that serious." But he wouldn't let it go. He kept going on and on about how I was always making promises and not following through, how he couldn't trust me. And I just snapped. I said, "Maybe we just shouldn't be together then." And he just looked at me really quietly and said, "Maybe you're right." And that was it. Just like that. I didn't even mean it. Not really. I was just trying to make him shut up. But he took it seriously. He actually left. He packed a bag, not a suitcase or anything, just a small bag, and went to stay with his friend. Jason, can you believe the nerve? Just like that. He was gone. I figured he'd be back in a few days, begging me to take him back. That's what always happens. But he didn't. He called me a week later and said he was getting his stuff, that he was done. And then that's when I started to get really scared. Because, where was I supposed to go? I couldn't afford the apartment by myself. Not really. I mean, I could have, but that would mean touching my savings. And I wasn't about to do that. And he was just so cold about it. Suddenly, Mr. Nice Guy was gone. He was all about his boundaries and moving on. It was sickening. So I started telling people, everyone, my friends, my family, even just people at work. I told them Mark was dangerous, that he had a temper, that he had threatened me. I mean, he hadn't, not really, but he had raised his voice once or twice, and he had slammed a door. So it wasn't technically a lie. It was just an exaggeration. For my safety, I needed people to understand why I was in this situation, because it wasn't my fault. I even called some shelters just to see what my options were. And I told them everything. How Mark was so controlling, how he was emotionally abusive, how I was scared for my safety. I mean, I was scared. A little bit scared of being alone, scared of having to figure things out for myself. And I figured if I painted him as this monster, they'd have to help me, right? They'd have to understand. But then things got really weird. I tried to get into a shelter in Dallas because my sister lives there, and I figured I could crash with her if I needed to. But they told me they couldn't take me. They said I had been flagged for false claims, Can you believe that? Someone had gone and told them that I was lying, and I just knew it was Mark. He probably told his therapist everything, and his therapist probably told him to report me or something. Like, who does that? He always knew how to make things difficult. So I tried another shelter in Phoenix. Same thing. Flagged for false claims. It was like I was on some kind of blacklist. I couldn't understand it. I was just trying to protect myself. I was the victim here. And they were treating me like I was the one who had done something wrong. It was absolutely infuriating. I mean, maybe I exaggerated a little, but it was for a good reason. For my safety, I called my mom, crying. I told her what was happening, and she just kept saying, "Savannah, are you sure you didn't say anything that could be misinterpreted?" Misinterpreted. What was there to misinterpret? I was just telling the truth. From my perspective, she just doesn't get it. No one does. They all think Mark is so great because he's so quiet and unassuming. They don't see the real him. The one who tries to control everything, who makes you feel like you're crazy. And then the worst part happened. I lost my job, not directly because of this. They said, but my boss had been getting calls, anonymous calls, obviously, but I knew it was Mark or one of his stupid friends. They said there had been some unprofessional conduct. And I'm like, what unprofessional conduct? I do my job. But they just gave me my final paycheck and told me to leave. Just like that. After all I'd done for that company. It was a total setup. So now I'm here, no job, no place to stay, and no shelter will take me. I'm living out of my car, basically, and it's all Mark's fault. He just had to be so dramatic. He just had to go and tell everyone I was making things up. It's so unfair. I was just trying to survive. And now look at me. I have nothing, and he's probably out there, living his best life, all happy and free, with his boundaries and his self-awareness. It just makes me so mad. But you know what? I don't care anymore. I really don't. He can go be happy. I hope he is. But I'm still here. And I'm going to figure this out. I always do. It just sucks that I have to deal with all this because he couldn't just be a normal, reasonable person. It's always someone else's fault, isn't it? Never mind, because I always do what's best for me. And if that means telling a little white lie to protect myself, then so be it. It's not my fault if people don't understand. It's not my fault that no one wants to help me. It's just how it is. It's always someone else. Always.